Today on Washington TV. Robert Gates says no signs of North Korean military retaliation. President Obama condemns the Holocaust Museum shooting. Holbrooke says Pakistan determined to defeat the Taliban. Italian Foreign Minister urges new strategy on Iran. Press group says no independent coverage of election in Iran. Hamas calls on Obama to drop conditions for dialogue. And accusations, defamations, and the possibility of fraud. The worries of the candidates before tomorrow's election. These stories and more today on Washington TV.
Today in Washington. U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates said today that it does not appear that North Korea has taken moves to follow through on its threat of retaliation against the new United Nations sanctions. Gates said, "I don't think there has been a commensurate change in the posture of the North Korean military that would suggest an attempt to undertake operations." At the same time, Gates said that given Pyongyang's unpredictable nature, he does not dismiss its threats of military action. A draft UN Security Council resolution proposed yesterday would impose tough new sanctions against Pyongyang and allow inspections of North Korean vessels suspected of containing prohibited material. U.S. President Barack Obama said yesterday that he was shocked and saddened by a shooting at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, which left a security guard dead. James Von Brunn, an 88-year-old white supremacist, opened fire inside the museum, just blocks from the White House, before being shot himself by security guards. Obama said, "This outrageous act reminds us that we must remain vigilant against anti-Semitism and prejudice in all its forms." The slain security guard was identified as Stephen Jones, a 6-year veteran of the facility. The U.S. envoy to Afghanistan and Pakistan, Richard Holbrooke, said yesterday that Pakistan was more determined than ever to win the fight against Taliban fighters. Holbrooke told reporters at a briefing in Washington,
"What I saw in Pakistan on this trip was the slow emergence of a consensus behind the government's actions. And everywhere there was a dramatic change in attitudes from my previous trips because of the outrages of the Taliban."
Holbrooke also said that he believed Islamabad was strong enough to defeat the Taliban insurgency. Today's top stories. Reporters Without Borders yesterday condemned Iran's media coverage of tomorrow's presidential election in that country. It said, quote, "Iran's 46 million voters have been deprived of independent reporting in the national media throughout the campaign, which began on May 21st. Reporters Without Borders decried the reporting in both the state-owned newspapers and the so-called opposition dailies. The Press Freedom Group also reported that Iran's embassies in Berlin, Paris, Rome, and Madrid have refused to give foreign journalists accreditation to go over and cover the election. In some cases, embassy press attachés have demanded pro-Ahmadinejad coverage in return for a visa. Hamas leader Khaled Mashal said on Thursday that U.S. President Barack Obama should drop preconditions for dialogue with the Palestinian militant group. Mashal said, quote, "We hope that he will cancel conditions for dealing with Hamas." He said he's turning a new page with the region and talks with the Iranians are without preconditions, and with the Syrians. So why does he place conditions on Hamas? In his address to the Muslim world from Cairo last week, Obama called on Hamas to end violence, commit itself to past agreements between Israel and Palestinian Authority, and recognize Israel's right to exist. In an op-ed published yesterday in the New York Times, Italy's Foreign Minister Franco Frattini called for a new strategy in dealing with Iran, which envisions engaging with Tehran immediately on regional issues such as Afghanistan. Frattini wrote, "After 6 years in nuclear-only diplomacy, the time has come to tackle the Iranian question in a more comprehensive manner." He added, quote, "An indefinitely isolated Iran could become an incorrigible saboteur in many areas, from Central Asia to the Middle East to Afghanistan."
Today in election news. Speaking last night on Network 3 of Iran's state-run television, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who faces re-election on June 12, said that he had precise information that his election rivals believe that they will be defeated in tomorrow's election, and accused them of pursuing an agenda of creating tension after the election. Ahmadinejad, who was giving extra airtime to respond to comments made by his rivals during televised debates in which he did not participate, also said that during the election campaign, all other candidates opposed one person. He asked, why did they only attack, insult, and vilify me so? He said that the reasons for the vilification were the unrivaled activities of his government in various fields, which were a source of pride. He then added that the other reason for vilifications against his government was that his competitors are officials of the past, and when it becomes clear that all this work can be done in 4 years, questions are raised about previous officials. Ahmadinejad also said that his rivals had mounted a psychological warfare against his government. He added, they tell us you lie. Is going nuclear a lie? Is going to space, advances in biotechnology and nanotechnology, 20,000 inventions, 20,000 scientific articles published around the world, all these highways, a 70% increase in the number of university students in these 4 years, a lie? Pro-reform presidential candidate Mir Hossein Mousavi, in a letter to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, asked Iran's supreme leader to provide the means to ensure the impartiality of all officials, executors, and supervisors of the election on June 12th, Election Day. Mentioning what he called widespread election enthusiasm in the country, Mousavi told Khamenei, unfortunately, news is being relayed that some officials and official organs do not welcome this genuine popular movement. Mousavi said further that some provincial governors had not accepted his polling booth monitors. He also expressed concern about the interference of military personnel in the election. He wrote, some evidence of the interference in the election by some commanders and officials of the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps and Basij has been received, and it seems that if the news is accurate, in addition to negating laws, this conduct will foment a split between commanders and officials and the healthy body of the Guards and Basij forces. Concluding his letter, Mousavi wrote, I hope with the guidance and intervention by your eminence, favorable conditions are provided for, close attention to safeguarding the people's votes. Reformist presidential candidate Mehdi Karoubi, who was speaking in Iran's religious city of Qom in the last hours before the end of the election campaign period last night, expressed sorrow that Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, during 4 years in power, turned to superstition. He added, if from the beginning these deviations had been confronted, such superstitions would not have become prominent for us to be ridiculed so. Karoubi said that if he becomes the country's executive, he will attend to managing Iran. He stressed, managing the world does not concern us. The art is to be able to manage our own country correctly. Also last night, conservative presidential candidate Mohsen Rezai, in a statement addressed to the Iranian nation, said, in this election, the rule of the mob has occupied the people's minds in a strange way, and some agents, with particular aims, are inciting this situation to drive voters away from wisdom and consideration and lead them toward emotionalism and anger. He called on the people to brush aside scandalmongers and prepare the arena for those who are deserving. Iran's 10th presidential election is to be staged tomorrow, June 12th, and that country's Interior Ministry has announced that it will declare the result by Saturday night local time at the latest. These stories and more at televisionwashington.com.